This here is called a flask. It's made out of iron. Really simple mold. It just has two sides to it, the male and the female side there. They just fit together nicely. If we can get it, there we go. They fit together like that, and then you'll pour your metal into the top. Now the first step is going to be to put clay in the bottom, and then we'll press the piece into it after that. I'm going to show you the entire process so you know exactly how to do it for yourself. Now the clay that I'm using is called Delft clay, but you can also get Petrobond. You squish it together, and then it will hold its shape really well. So I'm just going to pack it into the bottom of this mold here. Now while I'm packing the clay in here, I just want to mention you can use tons of different metals for 3D casting. You can use copper, silver, gold, sterling silver, brass, whatever you want to use. I'm going to be using silver in this video because I love making stuff out of pure silver, and I'm working on a pure silver chess set. So now that we have the clay all packed into the bottom, we'll go ahead and scrape it off so it's nice and flat. Usually I like to flip it over and scrape off the backside as well, just so we have an even working piece here. And the next step will be to actually press the piece into the clay. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you press it only about halfway. It's very important that you don't go over halfway or under halfway, because you want the other half of the mold to have basically the mirror image of this side. If your 3D piece has two different sides, that's okay. Just try and find the middle like this. You can also see that the clay is very flat, which is exactly what we want. We don't want it coming up in one spot or dipping down. So the next step will be to put powder on the top so that the two halves of the mold break apart easily. This is called talcum powder, but you could use baby powder or something like that. Doesn't really matter. And then I have this bulb device that we're going to go ahead and blow off some of the powder so that there's not too much excess. I find it's best when there's just a little bit separating the two pieces. After that's done, we'll put the other half of the flask together, and then we're going to go ahead and pack this side with clay. You want to pack it nice and tight. Usually what I do is press it down with my hand until it's, about as hard as I can, and then I'll hit it with the hammer and get it a little tighter, and that's going to be the best way to do it. You don't want to pack it too tight, otherwise it might start to crack, but get it nice and tight so that the piece will end up looking good in the long run. So after that's done, we can go ahead and move all this to the side, and then we'll break it apart and see how it looks. This is looking really good. You just want to make sure both halves are complete. The next step is to make a channel for the metal to flow into. I'm using the back half of a drill bit. Take your time with this. There's no sense in rushing it and ruining the mold you just made. Then when pulling out the piece, just pull it straight up, and if there's any spots that start to collapse in, try and fix them with your fingers so you don't have to redo the whole thing. Make the channel on the other side, and you kind of want the channel to be a little bit wider at the top. What I'm doing now is drawing some lines with a toothpick for air to flow into, and these lines you just want to put on any corner of the piece. Another thing you can do is actually poke a hole all the way through to the other side to let a little bit more air escape. This is really important on detailed pieces, but if the piece you're doing is very simple, then it's probably not needed. Next, we're going to be putting the two halves together. You just want to make sure there's no excess clay that will actually ruin the mold. So once you slap them together like so, you can go ahead and put some rubber bands around them so they don't come apart at all. I find using rubber bands works the best because you don't have to worry about clamps or anything, and now we're all ready to pour. As far as melting goes, you can use a setup like this. This is my oxygen acetylene torch, and then I have a whip as well. You'll just melt the silver in there and then pour it out into the mold. But an easier strategy is using this right here. This is my furnace. We're going all the way up to 1095 degrees Celsius, which is about 2000 Fahrenheit. You can see the silver is already starting to melt down nicely. And then once it reaches full temperature, we're going to go ahead and pour it in. Now for the pouring process, I kind of block it here with my hands, but you just want to make sure you pour it really fast. It's okay if you pour a little bit too much because we're going to cut off the top anyway, so that doesn't really matter. As you can see here, I filled it not all the way to capacity, but a little bit overflow. After about 10 minutes, it will have cooled down enough to actually open it up, and then we can see this is actually looking really